Today we're working on the short story Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl. Over in the top right-hand corner, I have my 4-color annotating key for fiction, which is highlighting anything to do with the setting in green, characters in pink, plot in yellow, and any sort of literary devices in orange. We'll start with our green highlighter today with our setting. The room was warm, the curtains were closed, the 2 lamps were lit. On the cupboard behind her there were 2 glasses and some drinks. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. So with these first 2 sentences, we get, firstly, our description of the setting. And we're noticing some positive connotations here, that the room was warm. And we get our first character introduction, Mary Maloney. So we have our cozy home setting and our description of Mary as a dutiful wife. She's waiting for her husband to get home. We'll continue. Now and again, she glanced at the clock, but without anxiety. She merely wanted to satisfy herself that each minute that went by made it nearer the time when he would come home. As she bent over her sewing, she was curiously peaceful. This was her 6th month expecting a child. Her mouth and her eyes, with their new, calm look, seemed larger and darker than before. So we're learning more about her. She's not anxious. She's just waiting for her husband to come home. She's pregnant as well. So she's 6 months pregnant and calm. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the car tires on the stones outside, the car door closing, footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She stood up and went forward to kiss him as he entered. So, we just got our exposition, our introduction to the setting and the characters. Now we're moving into our rising action. And it starts right here with the husband coming home from work. So we're starting to get this picture of what this couple's routine looks like. And we'll keep going down here. "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello," he answered. So, notice the difference in greetings here. She calls him darling, but he just says hello. She took his coat and hung it up. Then she made the drinks, a strong one for him and a weak one for herself. And soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he was in the other chair holding the tall glass, rolling it gently so that the ice knocked musically against the side of the glass. So we're hearing more of their routine. She makes them drinks every night. She hangs up his coat. We have some more positive connotation words, gently and musically, down here. And we're seeing their routine. For her, this was always a wonderful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until after the first drink was finished, and she was satisfied to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved the warmth that came out of him when they were alone together. She loved the shape of his mouth, and she especially liked the way he didn't complain about being tired. So we're learning a little bit more about the husband. He seems to be kind of a quiet guy. He doesn't talk a lot. However, he does have this warmth in him that she likes. And she also specifically mentions that she likes how he doesn't complain about being tired. He seems maybe quiet, but kind, maybe. Tired, darling? Again, calling him darling. Yes, he sighed, I'm thoroughly exhausted. And as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drank it down in one swallow, although there was still half of it left. He got up and went slowly to get himself another drink. Okay, so this is where things start to change. Remember, she specifically said she liked that he didn't complain about being tired, but what is he doing in this next paragraph? He's complaining about being tired, something she said she didn't like. And then we get a second unusual thing. He's drinking his drink more quickly than usual. And the second thing is that he's getting up himself to get himself another drink. I'll get it, she cried, jumping up. Sit down, he said. So look at our juxtaposition here. She's jumping up. We have an exclamation point over here compared with him saying, sit down. We're seeing a difference in their attitudes towards each other. When he came back, she noticed that the new drink was a very strong one. She watched him as he began to drink. It's a shame, she said, that when someone's been a policeman as long as you have. So we learned two things. Husband is a police officer, and that he's apparently been working on the force for a while. He still has to walk around all day long. He didn't answer. Darling, she said, if you're too tired to eat out tonight as we had planned, I can fix you something. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer. Her eyes waited to an answer, a smile, a nod, but he made no sign. So, he's being quiet, and she's starting to get anxious about it. That's why we see her overcompensating. She's trying to sympathize with him. She's trying to get him to talk to her, but he is not playing into it. Anyway, she went on, I'll get you some bread and cheese. So it's that same anxiety playing out. We're seeing it more down here. I don't want it, he said. She moved uneasily in her chair. But you have to have supper. I can easily fix you something. I'd like to do it. We can have lamb, anything you want. Everything's in the freezer. Forget it, he said. But darling, you have to eat. I'll do it anyway. Then you can have it or not, as you like. She stood and placed her sewing on the table beside the lamp. Sit down, he said. Just for a minute, sit down. It wasn't until then that she began to get frightened. So, Mary is frightened by her husband's unusual behavior. So we're starting to see a shift here. They're not in their normal routine anymore. Go on, he said. Sit down. She lowered herself into the chair, watching him all the time with large, puzzled eyes. He had finished his second drink and was staring into the glass. Listen, he said. I've got something to tell you. What is it, darling? What's the matter? He became absolutely motionless, and he kept his head down. This is going to be a big shock to you, I'm afraid, he said. But I've thought about it a good deal, and I've decided that the only thing to do is tell you immediately. And he told her. It didn't take long, 4 or 5 minutes at most, and she sat still through it all, watching him with puzzled horror. So there it is, he added. And I know it's a tough time to be telling you this, but there simply wasn't any other way. Of course, I'll give you money and see that you're taken care of, but there really shouldn't be any problem. I hope not, in any case. It wouldn't be very good for my job. So, even though our author does not explicitly tell us what he said in this conversation, we can infer, based on the dialogue in these 2 paragraphs, that the husband asked her for a divorce, or is telling her he wants to get a divorce. And here's how we know. It's a tough time to be telling her this because she's pregnant. He will give her money, see that she's taken care of, the alimony. He's hoping that there will be an amicable divorce so that it does not cause a scandal in the town, especially with his role as a police officer. Her first instinct was not to believe any of it. She thought that perhaps she'd imagined the whole thing. Perhaps, if she acted as though she had not heard him, she would find out that none of it had ever happened. I'll fix some supper, she whispered. When she walked across the room, she couldn't feel her feet touching the floor. She couldn't feel anything except a slight sickness. So now she's anxious, which is different from the Mary we met at the start of the story, who was very calm. She did everything without thinking. She went downstairs to the freezer and took hold of the first object she found. She lifted it out and looked at it. It was wrapped in paper, so she took off the paper and looked at again. A leg of lamb. All right then, they would have lamb for supper. She carried it upstairs, held the thin end with both her hands. She went into the living room, saw him standing by the window with his back to her, and stopped. I've already told you, he said. Don't make supper for me. I'm going out. At that point, Mary Maloney simply walked up behind him, and without any pause, she swung the big frozen leg of lamb high in the air and brought it down as hard as she could on the back of his head. She might as well have hit him with a steel bar. So now we're getting into our climax, when she kills her husband with the leg of lamb. She stepped back, waiting, and the strange thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds. Then he crashed onto the carpet. The violence of the crash, the noise, the small table overturning helped to bring her out of the shock. She came out slowly, feeling cold and surprised, and she stood for a few minutes looking at the body, still holding the piece of meat tightly with both hands. So we're seeing another shift down here that our domestic setting is getting disrupted. All right, she told herself, so I've killed him. It was extraordinary now how clear her mind became all of a sudden. She began thinking very fast. As the wife of a detective, she knew what the punishment would be. It made no difference to her. In fact, it would be a relief. On the other hand, what about the baby? What were the laws about murderers with unborn children? Did they kill them both, mother and child? Did they wait until the baby was born? What did they do? Mary Maloney didn't know, and she wasn't prepared to take a chance. So we get a couple of things here in this paragraph. First is that she's now calm again and thinking. She's also perhaps okay with getting the death penalty. However, her fear is about her baby. Remember, she's 6 months pregnant. She carried the meat into the kitchen, put it into a pan, turned on the oven, and put the pan inside. Then she washed her hands, ran upstairs, sat down in front of the mirror, fixed her makeup, and tried to smile. So she's trying to carry on with the domesticity she had earlier. She's still preparing dinner, trying to cover up what happened. The smile was rather peculiar. She tried again. "Hello, Sam," she said brightly, aloud. The voice sounded peculiar, too. "I want some potatoes, Sam. Yes, and perhaps a can of beans." That was better. Both the smile and the voice sounded better now. She practiced them several more times. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, and went out the back door, through the garden, into the street. So she has to practice how to act like herself. It wasn't 6 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the neighborhood grocery. "Hello, Sam," she said brightly, smiling at the man in the shop. "Good evening, Mrs. Maloney. How are you?" "I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and perhaps a can of beans, too. Patrick's decided he's tired, and he doesn't want to eat out tonight," she told him. "We usually go out on Thursdays, you know, and now I don't have any vegetables in the house." How about some meat, Mrs. Maloney?" asked the grocer. "No, I've got meat, thanks. I've got a nice leg of lamb from the freezer." "Do you want these potatoes, Mrs. Maloney?" "Oh, yes, they'll be fine. 2 pounds, please." "Anything else?" The grocer turned his head to one side, looking at her. "How about dessert? What are you going to give him for dessert?" "How about a nice piece of cake? I know he likes cake." "Perfect," she said. "He loves it." So what's ironic about this? That they're planning this nice meal for Patrick. Who was not going to get to enjoy the nice dinner we're making for Patrick? And when she had bought and paid for everything, she gave her brightest smile and said, "Thank you, Sam. Good night." And now, she told herself as she hurried back home, she was returning to her husband and he was waiting for his supper. She had to cook it well and make it taste as good as possible because the poor man was tired. And if she found anything unusual or terrible when she got home, then it would be a shock and she would have to react with grief and horror. Of course, she was not expecting to find anything unusual at home. She was just going home with vegetables on Thursday evening to cook dinner for her husband. So in this section, Mary is trying to cover up what happened. She's trying to maintain her usual routine. That's the way, she told herself. Do everything normally. Keep things absolutely natural and there'll be no need for acting at all. As she entered the kitchen by the back door, she was quietly singing to herself. "Patrick," she called. "How are you, darling?" Can Patrick answer her? No, probably not. She put the package on the table and went into the living room, and when she saw him lying there on the floor, it really was a shock. All the old love for him came back to her, and she ran over to him, knelt down beside him, and began to cry hard. It was easy. No acting was necessary. So now we're starting to see that old side of Mary, the loving side that we met. A few minutes later, she got up and went to the phone. She knew the number of the police station, and when the man at the other end answered, she cried to him, "Quick, come quickly! Patrick's dead!" "Who's speaking?" "Mrs. Maloney, Mrs. Patrick Maloney." "Do you mean that Patrick's dead?" "I think so," she cried. "He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead." "We'll be there immediately," the man said. The car came very quickly, and when she opened the front door, 2 policemen walked in. She knew them both. She knew nearly all the men at the police station. She fell into Jack Noonan's arms, crying uncontrollably. He put her gently into a chair. "Is he dead?" she cried. "I'm afraid he is. What happened?" In a few words, she told her story about going into the grocer and coming back when she found him on the floor. While she was crying and talking, Noonan found some of the dried blood on the dead man's head. He hurried to the phone. Some other men began to arrive. A doctor, 2 detectives, a police photographer, and a man who knew about fingerprints. So now we're getting into our falling action. The detectives kept asking her a lot of questions. They always treated her kindly. She told them how she'd put the meat into the oven. It's there now. And how she'd gone to the grocer's for vegetables, and how she came back to find him lying on the floor. So we're seeing a few things here about how the detectives are treating Mrs. Maloney. They almost like she's a child. Even though we, the audience, know there's more to her than what the police are seeing. The 2 detectives were exceptionally nice to her. They searched the house. Sometimes Jack Noonan spoke to her gently. He told her that her husband had been killed by a blow to the back of the head. They were looking for the weapon. The murderer might have taken it with him, but he might have thrown it away or hidden it. It's the old story, he said. Get the weapon and you've got the murderer. So this is an important plot point. We're understanding how the police are conducting their investigation. And he says specifically, get the weapon and you've got the murderer. So that's what they're looking for. Later, one of the detectives sat down beside her. Did she know, he asked, of anything in the house that could have been used as a weapon? Would she look around to see if anything was missing? So this is more about our setting. However, it's very different from the setting we were introduced to, because her house has now been transformed into a crime scene. The search went on. It began to get late. It was nearly 9 o'clock. The men searching the rooms were getting tired. "Jack," she said, "would you like a drink? You must be extremely tired." So Mary's continuing her housewife duties. "Well," he answered, "it's not allowed by police rules, but since you're a friend..." They stood around with drinks in their hands. The detectives were uncomfortable with her, and they tried to say cheering things to her. Jack Noonan walked into the kitchen, came out quickly, and said, "Look, Mrs. Maloney, did you know that your oven is still on and the meat is still inside?" "Oh," she said, "so it is. I'd better turn it off." She returned with tearful eyes. "Would you do me a favor? Here you all are, all good friends of Patrick's, and you're helping to catch the man who killed him. You must be very hungry by now because it's long past your supper time, and I know that Patrick would never forgive me if I let you stay in the house without offering you anything to eat. Why don't you eat up the lamb in the oven?" It's also interesting to note that all of the police who are gathered at the house are Patrick's friends looking for his killer. "I wouldn't dream of it," Noonan said. "Please," she begged. "Personally, I couldn't eat a thing, but it'd be a favor to me if you ate it up. Then you can go on with your work." The detectives hesitated, but they were hungry, and in the end they went into the kitchen and helped themselves to supper. The woman stayed where she was and listened to them through the open door. She could hear them speaking amongst themselves, and their voices were thick because their mouths were full of meat. So this is more of our irony. They're looking for the murder weapon, but they don't know that they've already found it. Dramatic irony. "Have some more, Charlie." "No, we'd better not finish it." "She wants us to finish it. She said we ought to eat it up." "That's a big bar the murderer must have used to hit poor Patrick. The doctor says the back of his head was broken to pieces." "That's why the weapon should be easy to find." "Exactly what I say." "Whoever did it, he can't carry a weapon that big around with him." "Personally, I think the weapon is somewhere near the house. It's probably right under our noses. What do you think, Jack?" And in the other room, Mary Maloney began to laugh. So why do you think Mary Maloney is laughing? Real quick with your partner, I want you guys to turn and talk about this line and why it's important to the plot.